This is our final presentation for PBH 340. We called it A Walk in Winchester, Nevada by Aliyah Williams and Max Andrew Ohala. Here's a brief introduction. For our neighborhood assessment project, Aliyah and I chose to focus our investigations in the area surrounding Valley High School in Winchester, Nevada. This area backs up against the boundary to Paradise, Nevada, but we focused primarily on Winchester. The population of Winchester was 36,403 according to the 2020 census.
So the first thing that we're going to discuss is the food environment in Winchester. The food environment in Winchester, Nevada was not great, with the MRFEI being 20%, and there were only 4 healthy food outlets, 2 convenience stores, 9 fast food restaurants, 5 restaurants, and 0 farmers markets. There were very few supports in this area, with only 2 Mexican-influenced grocery stores called Cardenas and La Bonita. There are also school lunch programs that support this area and a bus transportation system. For some of the barriers, me and my partner considered this area a food desert, which provided few healthy food options. It's also poor walkability, located 5 to 10 minutes outside of the 20-minute walkability zone. There was also an over-reliance on automobiles, minimal bike infrastructure, and lack of affordable or high-quality food in the walkable range. For the physical design change, I think we should repurpose a large available space near Valley High School into a grocery store. All they have in this area in the bottom left picture is a smoke shop, Roberto's, and a dollar loan center. Behind the available grocery store is an abandoned auto shop, and I believe we can redevelop it into creating apartments, stores, and offices. The next thing we are going to be discussing is the physical activity near Valley High School. For the physical activity in this area, there were only 2 parks, which included Valley High School. There's another park called JC Park, which is located north of the campus, and its amenities included a skate park, 2 tennis courts, a soccer field, 2 playgrounds, and a dog park. And it also has a recreational sidewalk around the park. But this area also has 0 green spaces. Some of the supports for physical activity were holding events every weekend for the community to attend at JC Park. JC Park is also inside of the walkability range, which is 16 minutes from Valley High School. And Valley High School also functions as a park for the community. Another support for the physical activity of this area was that the residential housing were located in cul-de-sacs, which is great for children who want to go and play outside. They don't have to worry about the cars that drive by. Although there were a lot of supports, there's also a lot of barriers, which include lack of green space and park infrastructure. There is also high automobile traffic, a temporarily closed soccer field at JC Park, and there were also community members that called the news to bring the park to their attention. They mentioned that they do not want to bring their children to JC Park because there's garbage, broken glass, damaged playgrounds, graffiti, and dirty tables. So in the photos below, these businesses are actually all available. So I have an idea to create a park in between the middle school and the high school, which is closer to the surrounding neighborhoods. And the bottom right photo was actually a picture that I showed in the first physical design change that I had for the food environment. But it's actually a really big lot, and I think we could repurpose the abandoned lot into a green space near Valley High School.
For part 3, I'll be speaking about bikeability. Our bike score for this area was 42. Now, is this area bikeable? I would say not really. Unfortunately, our designated area was really quite poor in terms of bikeability. There were little to no designated bike lanes on arterial roads, where bikers were asked to share the bus lanes and the right turn lanes on some occasions. And on the residential streets, there was almost a total absence of bike lanes. Now, on Sahara Avenue heading west from Eastern to Maryland, we can see this here. In this first image, this is a conventional bike lane according to the NACDO Urban Bikeway Design Guide, as there is no barrier that would restrict the flow of traffic into this lane. However, bikers and buses are meant to share this space as a sort of shared bike lane and bus lane, which doesn't really make much sense to me. I see this quite often in the local infrastructure. I feel like this is a very common trend, is that bikers and buses are supposed to share the same lane. In this third picture here, we have a sign that says, bikes and buses only, except right turns, which I think implies that people are supposed to be turning right from this lane as well, which would become incredibly problematic if there was a bike and a bus and someone turning right at the same time. It just doesn't make much sense. For barriers to bikeability, we put that there were usually no bike lanes on residential streets, there were no green spaces and few parks in this area, lots of automobile traffic, poor bike infrastructure, no buffered bike lanes, shared bus, bike, and right turn lanes on arterial streets. For supports, we put that this was a sprawl-heavy environment which commodified bike transportation, quiet residential streets make biking safer, and the presence of community bike racks so travelers can lock their bikes. Bike lanes enable bicyclists to ride at their preferred speed without the interference from prevailing traffic conditions and facilitate predictable behavior and movements between bicyclists and motorists. This is largely untrue of existing bike lane infrastructure in our selected area of Winchester/Paradise, Nevada. I have two different ideas that would improve the bikeability of this area. For the first idea, our bike lane would be buffered occasionally to accommodate transit and bikers simultaneously. By splitting the conventional shared bike lane for bikers and buses, it would become possible to carve out space for both modes of transportation while not disturbing road infrastructure. Nearing right turns, this semi-buffered lane would break into a through right lane, allowing cars to yield to bike traffic so the turn could be performed. This design is similar to what the first image envisions, but I'd want the entire bike lane painted green for visibility. Idea 2 addresses residential areas specifically. Since there is almost a complete absence of bike lanes, I propose conventional bike lanes on either side of the road. Due to relatively light traffic within residential streets, I propose a combined bike and right turn lane for intersections. This would allow safe crossing in either directions for bikes and cars who would follow them during the flow of right turn traffic. Upon turning, bikes and automobiles would fall into their predetermined lanes. This is part 4, walkability. For our walk score, we got 44, and our transit score, we got 43. I included some supports and barriers in this slide as well. Some supports to walkability include curb cuts for mobility devices, relatively well-maintained buildings, and various transit stops that provide bench space. For barriers, we put sprawl, extensive trip hazards, lack of public parks, complete lack of green space, a few sidewalk buffers or shade trees, and then also the urban heat island effect caused by urban infrastructure. Before I touch on walkability, I'm going to be talking about transit. There are frequent stops along Sahara and other arterial streets. Main cons include safety, lack of resources towards the bus system, and punctuality. A couple improvements that could be made. I believe it would be wise to divest from the bus system and shift to an automated railcar system that utilizes existing bus lanes. Here is our arterial walkability audit. We chose a segment on Sahara Avenue on the north side of Sahara. We began at Eastern Avenue and ended at Maryland Parkway. Overall, this segment deserved an 11 out of 20, which is a 55% on the walkability audit. We chose a crossing at the intersection of Sahara and Maryland, crossing from north to south, and we found this to be adequate. There were no significant issues that needed changed. There was curb cuts, there was a walk timer, and there was enough time to cross the road. There are some changes needed for the segment in general, though, and I'll cover those in the next slide. What I noticed on these arterial sidewalks of Sahara Avenue was that there was no identifiable zones as determined by NACDO. For some reason, all of these zones are spread quite far apart from each other, but everything is also congested. In the frontage zone, everything is pushed back away from the sidewalk, so it doesn't actually create a zone, it just creates wide open space. There is a pedestrian through zone, but there are often obstacles in the way of pedestrian traffic. There is usually no street furniture in Zone 3, but we did have a lot of transit stops along Sahara Avenue. And as I talked about in the bikeability portion, there is a bike lane, but it is split with the bus lane and with right turn lanes. In this image on the right, we can see that all 4 of these zones are identifiable. There are shade trees, no obstacles that block the flow of pedestrian traffic, a buffer zone, parking, and a frontage zone. This is our residential walkability audit. I chose a segment of Vegas Valley Drive on the north side beginning at Maryland Parkway and ending at Burnham Avenue. Overall, this segment earned a 4 out of 20, which is a 20% on the walkability audit. The crossing was found to be inadequate as there was no pedestrian walk signal. On Vegas Valley Drive, there was a lack of curb cuts in some areas and other major trip hazards that posed threat. I would propose significant changes, and I'll detail those in the next slide. On the left, you can see some glaring issues in residential areas. Currently, there is no curb zone or any kinds of buffers or any kinds of shade. There are no pedestrian cross signals, no bike lanes, and inconsistency in sidewalk upkeep. I noticed that there is a chicane in the existing architecture that would make a walking buffer and furniture deployment feasible. I propose that mixed land use, recreational-driven urban plazas be constructed. I foresee these structures emphasizing plant materials and cultivation in their architectural designs. This is a biophilic approach to combating urban heat islands through the cultivation of plants and green architecture. This would indirectly encourage walkability in residential areas while being drought conscious. I also propose for stricter policies surrounding trip hazards within curbs, sidewalks, and crosswalks be implemented. The existing infrastructure is suboptimal. This area requires shade trees, awnings, benches, and water stations to improve walkability. And here is our references. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody.